All right, hello everyone. My name is Cesar Guerrero. I am a Oracle CX sales and service consultant. So I've been implementing Fusion sales and service, and today I want to talk to you about import management. So let's start off with what is import management, or what is importing? Importing is a tool that import management is a tool that we use to import. So when we import, we're importing data into what we call an object. So you can think of an object as a work area. And when we import, our goal is to feed data into the system. The system is broken up into different objects, so we can feed into these different objects. In this example right now, I'll be talking about, let's make it simple. So let's say that we're going to talk about Fusion Service. In Fusion Service, we have out-of-the-box objects that we can import, and we can also import into custom objects. So when we think of our out-of-the-box objects, we can think of service requests, activities, such as tasks and appointments. We can think of even users when we're building them out. So importing is a great tool to have. And an example of when you might want to import is when you need to do your initial load in an implementation. You might need to load 100,000 records. So you'll need to, in order to not have to build them out manually, you'd want to put them in a CSV and import them to get them in the system. You can also do this through an integration, but another scenario, let's say you're past that, past the initial import, would be maybe if you're doing service, there's an outage for 100 or 500 of your accounts, and you need to make a service request for this outage. You would be able to create these 500 service requests, one for each account, via import. That way you can create and respond to each outage appropriately. Oracle doesn't, as of now, there is, at least for this outage example, there's not a way to create, let's say, 500 records in one go from the UI. You would have to do an import. So that's one example that we could use imports. And really, there's 3 steps to an import. First would be preparing the file. For import management, we usually do CSVs, where we could define whether we're creating, updating, or deleting records. And then we would map all of the fields that we're importing to a specific, map each to a field that is in the system to a specific column in our table. And I'll run through an example as we get through the presentation. And lastly, we would just monitor the results. So there's an area where we're able to see the progress of the import. And lastly, after we do that, we would run adaptive search, which is a process that surfaces the data once it's in the system, because the data can exist in the backend or the database, but doesn't mean that it's resurfacing on the UI. Specifically with Redwood, in order to get it surfaced after an import, usually you need to run a adaptive search process. So those are the 3 steps needed for an import. So another thing I want to talk about is relationships. So when we think about relationships in import management, this is done through IDs. And what relationships am I talking about? So let's stay with that service request example. In a service request, you're usually going to associate it to an account and maybe a contact on the account. And in order to do that, Oracle uses IDs. And there's different IDs that you can have. And usually there's maybe 3 or 4 per object. I know that for account, sometimes there's an account ID. It's also sometimes listed as a party ID or an account number or a registry ID. And they all serve different purposes, or it can be different numbers, but they all would be key identifiers, meaning it's a unique identifier for a specific record. And you would have something similar for contacts as well. There'd be a contact ID and possibly a contact number or a contact name. Sometimes you do it through the email, and it's just a unique identifier that separates all the other contacts or records while you're making these relationships. Because a scenario could happen where there's two Caesars that are existing as contacts. You want to make sure you choose the right Cesar. So if my name is Cesar and one Cesar has the ID of 1 and the other one has the ID of 2, and you only want to associate the record to Cesar 1, you want to make sure that you're using the ID. So IDs are very important, and one of the key things that I've ran into when working in Fusion services, having to find these IDs. How do we do it? And there's two ways that I usually do it. One is through OTBI, so Oracle Analytics, your Oracle Transaction Business Intelligence, where we're able to add and build a report and see the different IDs that exist for the specific tables and columns that we're looking for. And this is a drag and drop tool. And then we also have export management, which is the opposite of import management, where we're able to select the fields from an object that we might want. So both are great tools. They both have their strengths and use cases. Another thing we might need is to get importing templates. Sometimes you need to see, what fields exist, and you're able to do that through import management. These are three things that at least I'll show you how to get the importing template, but I'll also go through a light version of how to import maybe one record. So next, let's talk about preparing and validating and submitting the import document. So again, this is very similar to what we talked about earlier, where our first step would be building out the CSV. Again, Fusion, at least me, I like doing CSVs. I feel like CSVs work the best, and that's one of the key formats that work for import. Next is choosing the activity. When we're doing the import, we want to make sure that we choose the object that's correct, and we want to make sure that's the right file. Then we also want to select some additional settings. Sometimes we can select if we want to create, update, or delete records. And lastly, again, as I mentioned, you want to monitor. There is a validation button where we're able to validate the import and make sure that the initial rows or columns are correct in your file. And so lastly, the last thing I want to touch on before we go into a live demo is triggers. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I just ran into a use case like this today, actually. And I thought it was really interesting. I have a requirement where when there is an outage, the example that I gave earlier, right? When there's an outage, users... an admin wants to be able to go and it's a very rare use case. They want to go in and make an import for maybe create 1,000 records for outages. All right. In doing that, there has to be. They also want a trigger or a notification sent or an email notification sent out to users. So how do we do this? And this is kind of goes outside of just the import piece, but I thought it was something that you or other consultants might run into. The first thing is there is an administrative profile value, and I've added it here on the left. I've turned this on. This allows logic to work during an import. Usually, triggers and workflows do not work on import. All the import's doing is adding the data in there, but it's bypassing everything else. So if you don't want to bypass that, you want to turn this profile value on. The next thing is you might want to do a trigger. This is this kind of similar to what I've done in service requests. And let's kind of break it up by the different steps that are going on. The first step is we're saying, In this case, this is a custom field. So this would be a checkbox. So if this checkbox is true and the assignee, so whoever's assigned to the service request, is not null, so meaning there is someone on the service request. So saying that checkbox is checked and there is someone assigned to the service request, then we're kicking in the trigger, which would be this def map. We're defining that we're mapping this to a package or a package set of instructions for an email trigger. So when we're mapping it to the subject, and this is the email subject, import service request, and then we're also mapping it to this template, and this would be the template name. And then we're also mapping it to the recipient and the recipient party ID. So this would be the source ID, who is assigned to it. And so yeah, we're triggering it as a notification. So this is something that I worked on. This would be something that you would be able to do something similar to. If you have any questions on an example like this, please let me know. Add a comment on there and I can make a video around how to, actually do it. So now let's go into the demo. All right, everyone. So I am currently in import management, and you can get to it by hitting the button on the left and then looking up import. And then you'd see it here, import management. Okay, so what now that we're here in import management, I want to show you something. There's a tab that you can't see above here, but it says there's 3 tabs. It says import queue, import object, and then import configuration. And so I kind of want to talk to you about each one. The first one that we were just in, import queue, this is where we can create the actual import. We would hit import activity, or we could do it from a template. The next one is import objects. This one's nice because here's a list of all the different objects, and if we hit download here, we'll get a file where we're able to save and then get an importing template. Unfortunately, the importing template, from what I remember, is it gives you more than what you need. So if you look on here, you can see that in this case, we're getting, this one doesn't have that much, but if you have an object that's a lot bigger, like service requests, it can go on to maybe 20, 30, 40 columns, depending on the object. But this one's a little smaller. You can see access group, manual signee. So what you would do is you get the name at the bottom, and then you get the you get the interface name. This is what we see on the screen, but then above that you get the name that you would import to. The API name isn't in this template, but you usually don't need it for import. But this helps because you get to see all the fields that are available. So that's one tool I want to share with you. The next one is called import configuration, and I click on that. If I click on the 3rd tab, and this one's important because let's say you create a custom object, and this has only happened to me maybe a handful of times, but I've had times where the field isn't appearing, and if a field doesn't appear when you're importing and it's a custom field, you're going to want to hit generate, and that will generate the artifact and kind of bring out all the custom fields. And you can see they explain it up here. But this is a very important button if you're building custom fields and you need to import. So all right, let's go into the import activity. So let's go create import activity. We'll give it just a second. The next thing I want to list out is, when you're building out an import activity, remember what I mentioned? It's broken down into 3 steps. The first one is enter import option, map fields, and then review and submit. So for the name, I'm just going to call this test. I'm not going to add a description. I'm going to type service. We're going to go into service requests, And now we get an option to add a file. And I'm going to choose a file that I have prepared. Let me look up the name. Test for import. So it's this one. Yep. Okay. And it's loaded. Then we have the advanced options at the bottom. This is important because it allows us to kind of change, like maybe the import format that we're using, the delimiter, the delimiter. So sometimes there might be times where you don't want to use comma because there's multiple commas in your template, so you might do something different. There's a bunch of other options that you're able to do. I've done pipe, I've done star, just depends on what you want. Then import mode. You want to be able to, depending on what you do, you could choose to delete records if you need to do that for whatever reason. You could create or update and create. In this case, I'm going to do update and create, although I'm just creating records. We're scheduling it immediately. This right here, enable custom business logic. So this is going to be important because we are going to do that logic that I spoke about, where I would get the email. I'm not going to demo that, but I just thought I'd let you know. So I'm going to hit next. Here are the fields, and I'm going to hit. So that I'm going to hit save as, but usually there's some automatic mapping that happens by default. Here you can see that. Notice how title and problem description got auto-populated. That's because these are the actual names. If you notice, there's not a space. So because of that, they auto-map because it's the exact same name as the problem description actual name in the system. So that's why they auto-mapped. The other ones, because they had spaces or they weren't correctly, there was something that was off from the auto mapping. That's why they did not get mapped. So let's hit test here. Here I'm going to get account number. And when we are creating records, you want to think about, what you need to create an actual record. Bare bones, you usually just need a title. So I'm pretty sure that maybe with a reference number or title or just a title, you'd probably create records. But you can set different criterias by making different required fields. Then we're going to do contact. And I believe, even though you see primary contact ID, we're not using that one. From what I remember, I'm using primary contact number. So I'm going to hit that, add that. And there's a save and close on the right. I'm going to hit that. And then I'm going to validate. And validating does take some time, but it, as you can see, after it validates, it'll turn green and then you're good. If I didn't validate, you get a little warning on the next page, but now you can see this is the test mapping that I've done. You see all the mapping here. I'll hit next. Now that we are in the next page, you're going to get some more of a final confirmation page before submitting. In my case, I know that this is going to work already, but this could be a good overview if you ever need to, just right before hitting submit, making sure that everything's set in the right manner, meaning like the advanced settings and all that. You'll see it right now. So let's give it 1 second. Okay, so this was that summary page that I kind of mentioned. So see, you kind of get everything in a big overview, and then you hit submit. And then everything's going to process. So we're going to wait, give it a minute. We can see here there's 2 items in the queue. If I hit refresh, give it 1 second. right there. This one's the one that we were working on. Remember, the name is test, import, and then I'm going to go into complete. And what you want is, hopefully this is going to complete as number 3. Earlier today, I did a unsuccessful test, and if you look at it, I think if we were to open it, I could see. Let's see. Yeah, you're able to download some files that'll tell you some issues around it. I'm gonna hit cancel. Let's go back here. Okay, so see the third one? This is it. So we know it's completed. But what do I want to do next? I'm going to go into setup and maintenance. And after this, I'll take you to the record so you can see how it looks. On the right, I'm going to hit task, search, configure adaptive. So service center. So from, you won't be able to see it here, but from the import file, this was this is a test import, and it worked correctly. So I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, please let me know, and have a great rest of your day.